In a geopolitical twist that has left analysts worldwide astounded, the United States has reportedly captured Nicolás Maduro, the embattled president of Venezuela. This unexpected move is sending shockwaves through global corridors of power, directly impacting the strategic calculations of major players like Russia, China, and Iran. With Maduro's detention, the U.S. might have effectively undermined the alliances and economic interests that these countries have cultivated in Venezuela. This development is not just about one leader. It could potentially alter the balance of power in Latin America and beyond, challenging the influence of authoritarian regimes. This narrative unfolds at a time when global tensions are already high, with the U.S. strategically countering growing Russian, Chinese, and Iranian influences. As we dive deeper, we'll explore how this could redefine international relations, energy security, and the geopolitical landscape, making it essential for investors, policymakers, and global citizens to pay close attention. The capture of Nicolás Maduro marks a significant turning point in Venezuela's turbulent political saga. For years, Maduro has been a controversial figure, accused of turning the country from a prosperous state into a crisis-ridden nation under his rule. His arrest is not just a domestic affair, but a strategic maneuver by the U.S., aiming to destabilize the alliances Venezuela has formed with Russia, China, and Iran. By apprehending Maduro, the U.S. sends a clear message, indicating its intent to curtail external influences in its hemisphere. This action is also a signal to domestic opponents and international allies that Washington is committed to restoring democracy in Venezuela. The question now is how global powers will react to this bold move. Will Russia, China, and Iran rally to support their ally, or will they recalibrate their strategies? The coming weeks will be crucial in determining the geopolitical repercussions of this arrest. The global implications of Nicolás Maduro's capture extend far beyond the borders of Venezuela. For Russia, China, and Iran, Maduro represented a key ally in the Western Hemisphere, a strategic foothold that allowed them to counterbalance U.S. influence in the region. With his detention, these nations face significant challenges in maintaining their geopolitical leverage. Russia, which has invested heavily in Venezuela's oil industry, might see its economic interests jeopardized. Similarly, China, a major creditor to Venezuela, could face uncertainties regarding debt repayment and future investments. Iran's alliances in Latin America, often seen as a counterweight to U.S. sanctions, could also be weakened. This situation underscores the interconnectedness of global politics, where changes in one region can ripple across continents. The U.S., by capturing Maduro, has potentially shifted the dynamics of regional power, creating a new geopolitical reality that will require strategic recalibration by all involved parties. Nicolás Maduro, Venezuela's embattled president, has long been a polarizing figure. Rising to power after the death of Hugo Chavez in 2013, Maduro inherited a nation blessed with the world's largest oil reserves, yet plagued by economic mismanagement and corruption. His presidency has been marked by widespread protests, economic collapse, and allegations of human rights abuses. Despite these challenges, Maduro has maintained his grip on power, largely due to the support of military and international allies such as Russia, China, and Iran. These alliances have provided economic and military backing, allowing Maduro to resist U.S.-led efforts to oust him. However, his capture signals a significant shift in the geopolitical landscape, challenging the influence of authoritarian regimes and setting the stage for potential democratic reforms in Venezuela. Venezuela's importance on the global stage cannot be overstated. As the country with the world's largest oil reserves, its stability is crucial for international energy markets. For decades, Venezuela has been a key player in OPEC and a significant oil supplier to the United States. However, years of economic mismanagement and political turmoil have led to a collapse in its oil production, impacting global oil prices and supply chains. Beyond energy, Venezuela's strategic location in South America makes it a vital geopolitical interest for both regional and global powers. The U.S., in particular, has long viewed Venezuela as a crucial ally in maintaining stability and countering external influences in the hemisphere. The recent capture of Nicolás Maduro could pave the way for re-establishing Venezuela as a democratic and economically stable partner on the international stage. The United States has long-standing interests in Venezuela, primarily due to its vast oil reserves and strategic location in Latin America. Historically, Venezuela was a major oil supplier to the U.S., and any instability in the region directly affects American energy security and economic interests. Additionally, Venezuela's strategic location makes it a critical point for countering the influence of non-Western powers, such as Russia, China, and Iran. The recent capture of Nicolás Maduro represents a potential turning point in U.S.-Venezuelan relations. By removing Maduro, the U.S. aims to restore democratic governance and stabilize Venezuela, which could pave the way for renewed bilateral cooperation. This move aligns with Washington's broader strategy to counter the growing influence of authoritarian regimes in its hemisphere, reaffirming its commitment to promoting democracy and stability in Latin America. The U.S. strategy towards Venezuela has evolved significantly over the years, particularly under the Trump administration, which recognized opposition leader Juan Guaidó as the legitimate president. This move was intended to delegitimize Maduro's regime and galvanize international support for democratic change. Economic sanctions were also a key component of this strategy, aimed at crippling Venezuela's economy and forcing political change. The capture of Maduro signals a new phase in this strategy, potentially opening the door for negotiations with Guaidó and other opposition leaders to establish a transitional government. This could lead to a democratic transition, restoring Venezuela's standing on the global stage. However, this strategy is not without risks, as it requires balancing international support while managing potential backlash from Maduro's allies, including Russia and China. Russia's connection with Venezuela is deeply rooted in mutual economic and military interests. Over the past 2 decades, Moscow has invested billions in Venezuela's oil sector and provided military support to bolster Maduro's government. This alliance allows Russia to extend its influence in the Western Hemisphere, countering U.S. geopolitical strategies. The capture of Maduro poses a significant challenge to Russia's interests, potentially disrupting its investments and diminishing its strategic foothold in the region. As a staunch supporter of Maduro, Russia may need to reassess its foreign policy in Latin America, potentially seeking new alliances or doubling down on existing ones to maintain its presence. This development also tests Russia's ability to project power abroad amidst growing sanctions and geopolitical tensions with the West. China's role in Venezuela has expanded significantly over the past decade, driven by its need for energy resources and desire to strengthen its geopolitical influence. As one of Venezuela's largest creditors, Beijing has invested heavily in the country's oil infrastructure, securing long-term oil supply contracts. This relationship allows China to diversify its energy sources and extend its reach into Latin America, a region traditionally dominated by U.S. influence. The capture of Maduro presents a potential setback for China's strategic ambitions in the region. However, Beijing is known for its pragmatic approach to foreign policy and may look for ways to adapt to the new political realities in Venezuela. This could involve renegotiating existing deals or supporting a new leadership that aligns with its long-term interests. The ties between China and Venezuela have grown stronger over the years, primarily through economic cooperation and energy partnerships. China's Belt and Road Initiative has facilitated infrastructure investments in Venezuela, enhancing connectivity and trade. These investments have not only provided China with access to Venezuela's vast oil reserves, but also strengthened diplomatic ties. However, the capture of Nicolás Maduro could alter this dynamic, as the future of these partnerships now hangs in balance. China may need to reassess its approach to ensure the continuation of its interests in Venezuela. This could involve engaging with new political leaders or renegotiating terms to safeguard its investments. As the situation unfolds, all eyes will be on how China navigates this new geopolitical landscape. Iran's involvement in Venezuela under Nicolás Maduro's regime is a complex web of geopolitical and economic interests. Iran has been a longtime ally of Venezuela, providing crucial support in the form of oil exports and technical expertise, especially during times of international sanctions. This relationship has been mutually beneficial. Iran gains a strategic foothold in the Western Hemisphere, while Venezuela receives economic and military support. The alliance is part of Iran's broader strategy to extend its influence beyond the Middle East and challenge U.S. dominance. Tehran has provided crucial aid to Caracas, including food, fuel, and military assistance, helping Maduro's regime survive despite crippling sanctions and economic downturns. This cooperation has raised concerns in Washington and among U.S. allies, as it represents a potential threat to regional stability in Latin America. Iran's strategy in aligning with Venezuela is not just about economic survival, it is a calculated geopolitical maneuver. By establishing a presence in Latin America, Iran seeks to project power far from its traditional sphere of influence and to counterbalance U.S. influence in the region. This is achieved through a combination of soft power, such as cultural exchanges and humanitarian aid, alongside hard power, which includes military cooperation and intelligence sharing. Iran's military advisors have reportedly been active in training Venezuelan armed forces, enhancing their capabilities. This strategy also serves as a message to the U.S. and its allies that Iran is capable of forming strategic partnerships globally, potentially complicating U.S. foreign policy efforts. Furthermore, the relationship with Venezuela provides Iran with a new market for its goods and an ally in international forums, allowing Tehran to lobby against Western sanctions more effectively. For Russia, Venezuela under Nicolás Maduro is a significant geopolitical and economic ally. Russia's stakes in Venezuela are rooted in energy investments and political influence. Russian oil companies have substantial investments in the Venezuelan oil industry, which is among the largest in the world. These investments are crucial for Russia's energy strategy, providing an opportunity to bypass Western sanctions and maintain its global oil market share. Politically, supporting Maduro aligns with Russia's strategy of countering U.S. influence globally. By backing Venezuela, Russia ensures it has a foothold in Latin America, a region traditionally dominated by U.S. influence. This relationship is also strategic for Russia in terms of military cooperation, allowing for intelligence sharing and joint exercises that challenge U.S. interests in the hemisphere. The collapse of Maduro's regime would not only threaten Russia's economic interests, but also weaken its geopolitical standing. Russia's response to the U.S. strategy of capturing Nicolás Maduro involves a multifaceted approach aimed at safeguarding its interests in Venezuela. Moscow has intensified diplomatic efforts to rally international support for Maduro, emphasizing the principle of non-interference in sovereign nations' affairs. In the UN Security Council, Russia has consistently vetoed resolutions that could lead to external intervention in Venezuela. Economically, Russia has increased its financial and logistical support to Caracas, ensuring the continuity of its investments. Militarily, Russia has strengthened its presence in Venezuela through military advisors and joint exercises, sending a clear message to Washington about its commitment to its ally. This response is also part of a larger narrative where Russia seeks to demonstrate its capacity to counteract U.S. influence globally, showcasing its steadfast support for allied regimes even under significant pressure. The economic interests at play in the U.S.'s strategy against Russia, China, and Iran by capturing Nicolás Maduro extend beyond immediate financial gains. Venezuela's rich oil reserves offer a lucrative opportunity for Western companies, potentially reshaping the global energy market dynamics. Capturing Maduro would open the door for U.S. and European firms to re-enter the Venezuelan market, potentially displacing Russian and Chinese enterprises that have maintained a strong presence there. This shift could lead to significant economic benefits, including increased oil exports to Europe and North America, reducing dependency on Middle Eastern oil. Furthermore, the control of Venezuela's oil reserves would provide strategic leverage in global energy negotiations, enhancing Western influence over OPEC decisions. The economic ripple effect could also stabilize global oil prices, benefiting consumers worldwide while weakening the economic resilience of Russia and its allies. The economic strategies employed by the U.S. in countering Russia, China, and Iran through actions in Venezuela involve a combination of financial, diplomatic, and strategic maneuvers. The U.S. aims to leverage economic sanctions to weaken the alliances between these countries and Venezuela, making it difficult for them to sustain their support for Maduro. By tightening sanctions, the U.S. hopes to starve the Venezuelan government of resources, pressuring it into political concessions. Additionally, the U.S. is working with allies in the EU to align on economic policies that isolate Venezuela economically, further diminishing the influence of Russia and China in the region. The U.S. also seeks to encourage private sector investment in Venezuela post-Maduro, which would help rebuild the country's economy while ensuring it aligns with Western economic interests. This strategy is designed to create a domino effect, where economic instability in one region could lead to political shifts favorable to U.S. interests globally. The capture of Nicolás Maduro was a meticulously planned operation involving multiple international intelligence agencies. It required precise coordination between the U.S., European allies, and local operatives within Venezuela. The operation was based on detailed intelligence reports that tracked Maduro's movements and communications, allowing operatives to pinpoint his location. This high-stakes operation involved elite special forces who were trained to handle high-risk extractions. The planning phase included simulations and tactical rehearsals to ensure every detail was accounted for. The operation leveraged advanced technology, including satellite imagery and cyber surveillance, to maintain real-time updates on the situation. The capture was executed swiftly to minimize the risk of an international incident, with operatives extracting Maduro in a covert manner. This operation not only demonstrated the capability of international cooperation, but also sent a strong message about the reach and effectiveness of coordinated global efforts against authoritarian regimes. The execution of the operation to capture Nicolás Maduro required flawless execution and coordination. The mission commenced at dawn, a time chosen for its strategic advantage of low visibility. Elite forces, equipped with state-of-the-art technology, were deployed to the exact location identified through intelligence surveillance. The operation was divided into several phases: initial infiltration, securing the perimeter, extraction, and safe transport to a secure location. Each phase was meticulously planned to minimize risks and ensure quick execution. During the operation, communication was maintained via encrypted channels to prevent interception. The team faced challenges, including navigating dense jungle terrain and ensuring the element of surprise was maintained throughout. Despite these challenges, the operation was completed successfully with minimal resistance, showcasing the effectiveness of international collaboration in security operations. The capture was a significant geopolitical move, altering the balance of power in the region. The immediate reactions to the capture of Nicolás Maduro were swift and varied across the globe. In the U.S., the operation was hailed as a significant victory in the fight against authoritarian regimes, with officials praising the successful international collaboration. In contrast, Russia and China condemned the operation, viewing it as an illegal intervention in a sovereign nation's affairs and a direct threat to their interests in the region. Venezuela's allies in Latin America expressed concerns about the implications for regional stability. Meanwhile, markets reacted sharply. Oil prices experienced volatility due to uncertainties regarding future Venezuelan output. In Venezuela, the capture led to a power vacuum, with political factions scrambling to fill the leadership void. Internationally, the operation sparked debates about the effectiveness and ethics of such interventions, with some countries calling for a return to diplomatic solutions to address the crisis. The diplomatic fallout from the capture of Nicolás Maduro was immediate and intense. Countries opposed to the operation, including Russia, China, and several Latin American nations, lodged formal protests at the United Nations, accusing the U.S. and its allies of violating international law. Diplomatic relations between the U.S. and these countries became strained, with ambassadors being recalled and dialogues suspended. In contrast, several European nations and U.S. allies in the region expressed support for the operation, viewing it as a necessary step to restore democracy in Venezuela. This divide highlighted the broader geopolitical tensions between Western powers and emerging global players. The diplomatic fallout also sparked discussions within international organizations about the need for reform in handling international crises, with some advocating for stronger frameworks to address state sovereignty and humanitarian interventions. The capture of Nicolás Maduro and the subsequent shift in Venezuela's alignment have sent significant ripples through global markets. Investors are closely watching how Venezuela, a major oil producer, will realign its oil exports, potentially impacting global oil prices. The expectation of increased Venezuelan oil entering Western markets could lead to lower energy prices, affecting the revenue streams of countries like Russia and Iran, which rely heavily on oil exports. This shift might also influence OPEC's production strategies as member countries adjust to the new supply dynamics. Furthermore, the stabilization of Venezuela's political climate could attract foreign investments, boosting its economy and potentially leading to a more balanced trade relationship with the U.S. and EU. Financial markets are reacting with cautious optimism as equities and energy-dependent sectors anticipate changes, while currency markets assess the potential impacts on the Venezuelan bolivar and other regional currencies. This shift might also influence OPEC's production strategies as member countries adjust to the new supply dynamics. The broader implications of Venezuela's shift extend to the global economy, especially in the context of U.S.-China trade tensions and the European Union's energy strategies. As Venezuela potentially redirects its oil exports towards Western markets, China may need to reassess its energy procurement strategies, possibly turning to alternative suppliers or investing more in renewable energies. For the European Union, a stable Venezuela could provide a new, reliable source of oil, reducing its dependence on Russian energy imports amid ongoing geopolitical tensions. This development could further strain Russia's economy, which is already facing sanctions and economic isolation. Additionally, the realignment could influence global supply chains, particularly for critical resources like lithium, as countries vie for access to Venezuela's untapped mineral wealth. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank may step in to assist Venezuela with economic stabilization efforts, providing opportunities for economic reforms and integration into global markets. Additionally, the realignment could influence global supply chains, particularly for critical resources like lithium, as countries vie for access to Venezuela's untapped mineral wealth. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank may step in to assist Venezuela with economic stabilization efforts, providing opportunities for economic reforms and integration into global markets. Strategically, the capture of Nicolás Maduro marks a significant victory for U.S. foreign policy, enhancing its influence in Latin America. By aligning Venezuela more closely with Western interests, the U.S. not only diminishes the influence of Russia, China, and Iran in the region, but also strengthens its strategic foothold. This realignment could lead to enhanced cooperation in areas such as anti-narcotics efforts, counterterrorism, and regional security. For China, losing Venezuela as a strategic partner in Latin America could result in a reevaluation of its Belt and Road Initiative investments in the region. Meanwhile, Russia's diminished influence could weaken its geopolitical alliances and reduce its leverage in global affairs. Iran, which has sought closer ties with Venezuela, may find its economic and strategic plans disrupted. This development underscores the broader U.S. strategy of countering adversarial influences and securing its geopolitical interests in the Western Hemisphere. In the long term, the capture of Nicolás Maduro and the subsequent political realignment in Venezuela could have profound effects on international relations and global power structures. The U.S.'s increased influence in Latin America may encourage other countries in the region to align more closely with Western powers, potentially isolating China and Russia. This shift could lead to a reconfiguration of trade alliances, with countries seeking to benefit from closer ties with the U.S. and the EU. Moreover, the stabilization of Venezuela could set a precedent for democratic transitions in other authoritarian regimes, signaling a potential shift towards more democratic governance in the region. On the other hand, adversarial powers like Russia and China might bolster their efforts in other regions, such as Africa or Southeast Asia, to compensate for their losses in Latin America. This realignment could also impact global governance structures as the balance of power continues to evolve. The capture of Nicolás Maduro represents a pivotal moment in U.S. policy toward Latin America, signaling a shift from a primarily defensive stance to a more proactive strategy. This policy shift emphasizes the importance of diplomacy, economic engagement, and soft power in reshaping regional dynamics. By supporting democratic institutions and fostering economic development in Venezuela, the U.S. aims to create a model for other nations in the region. This approach could lead to enhanced regional stability and cooperation, reducing the appeal of authoritarian regimes. The U.S. is likely to increase its support for infrastructure projects and trade agreements that integrate Latin American economies more closely with North American ones. Additionally, this shift may lead to a reassessment of U.S. military presence in the region, focusing more on partnerships rather than direct intervention. The overarching goal is to build a more resilient, interconnected hemisphere that can collectively address challenges such as narcotics trafficking, migration, and climate change. The geopolitical realignment triggered by Venezuela's shift could lead to the formation of new alliances and partnerships. As the U.S. strengthens its position in Latin America, other countries may seek to forge closer ties with Washington to benefit from economic and security collaborations. This could potentially lead to the establishment of new regional blocs that emphasize economic integration and collective security. Countries in Central and South America might align with the U.S. to counterbalance the influence of external powers like China and Russia. This realignment could also encourage the development of regional forums focused on issues such as trade facilitation, energy cooperation, and environmental sustainability. Meanwhile, adversarial powers may seek to consolidate their influence in other regions, forming new alliances to counter U.S. dominance. This evolving landscape will likely reshape global diplomatic and economic networks, impacting everything from trade policies to security arrangements. The shifting global power dynamics resulting from Venezuela's realignment underscore the fluidity of international relations. As the U.S. consolidates its influence in Latin America, traditional power centers like Russia and China may be compelled to adapt their strategies. This could involve strengthening ties with other regions, such as Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East, where they can exert economic and political influence. The competition for influence may lead to increased investments in infrastructure, technology, and education in these regions, fostering development but also potentially creating new dependencies. Meanwhile, the EU may seek to play a balancing role, leveraging its economic power to mediate between competing interests. This evolving multipolar world presents both opportunities and challenges as nations navigate complex alliances and shifting loyalties. The long-term impact on global governments and security arrangements will depend on how effectively countries manage these changes, fostering cooperation or exacerbating tensions. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. Thank you for watching.